Hey friend, I see you. And I know that October can be a super challenging month for many breast cancer survivors. And especially when it comes to emotional eating, right? And it becoming even more difficult to manage during this month. Now, October, as you are well aware, and I don't need to remind you, but for those who aren't aware, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And everywhere you look, there are reminders of your journey, whether you're ready to face them or not, whether you want to face them or not. There's a flood of pink ribbons, events, and conversations about cancer. And I just want to point out something that you'll notice if you go to my website, if you are looking at any of my events, my Facebook page, anywhere that you will find me. I do not typically use the color pink, nor do I tend to use pink ribbons. And that is intentional because I know from many survivors that the color pink and pink ribbons are a trigger for them in a negative way. And so I didn't want to do that when I was setting out to support breast cancer survivors. And so I just wanted to let you know that if you're not seeing that, on my posts and things like that, that's why. It's absolutely intentional. It's not to say it won't pop up every now and then. But I know that it can stir up this real whirlwind of emotions, right? As a survivor myself. And if you have been struggling with emotional eating lately, as many of you might have been, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Today, we're going to be talking about taming emotional eating during Pink October. All right. Sound good? And if we haven't yet met, my name's Karin. I'm a health coach, breast cancer survivor, and resilient routines expert. And I specialize in helping making eating healthier easier. Honestly, it's that simple. And talking about cravings and emotional eating is something that is important when it comes to eating healthy, right? Now, October, like we said, can be hard for breast cancer survivors. I've noticed, for myself, especially earlier on in my journey, I was diagnosed in 2018, but it can be mixed emotions, right? And which can often be confusing. On the one hand, for sure, it's a time to celebrate, right? Survival, hope, awareness of a disease that, we need help with. But on the other hand, if you've gone through it, it can bring up feelings of grief, loss, trauma, because going through breast cancer is a trauma. 82.5% of breast cancer survivors suffer from PTSD, which is why October can be very difficult. And even, the fear of memories, right, of your being diagnosed, treatment, recovery, they can all bubble up and resurface. I want you to know if you're experiencing this, this is not uncommon and you are not alone. So please do not think that it is just you. I've spoken to hundreds of women who experience the same thing. In fact, in my Facebook group, the Healthy Living After Breast Cancer Facebook community, we have 1,800 women who, most of which would raise their hand and say, me too. Okay. So, the heightened awareness during this month, I want to acknowledge. For some people, it can make you feel really overwhelmed. And that in turn can lead to emotional eating, right? Stress eating. We're human. And this stress eating can often become almost like a coping mechanism, right? To deal with these feelings, trying to numb them out, trying not to feel them. Again, these are human experiences. This is not you doing something wrong. These are human experiences. But I think it's also important to notice that October is the beginning of the holiday season, right? A time when all of these indulgent foods become even more accessible. Halloween's at the end of this month. All the candy, right? There tend to be more social gatherings. And for some people, the focus on food in the holidays can make managing emotional eating even more difficult, even more challenging. So all of these factors can add up, leading you to turn to food for comfort, okay, when you're feeling emotionally drained or exhausted or stressed or any or all of the above, right? Again, human experience. Now, I know that one of the most frustrating parts of emotional eating is feeling like you're reaching for food. You may even be aware of this, right? You know that you're reaching for it to deal with the stress or sadness or even celebration, but you're recognizing that you're reaching for it for that reason. But then so often what happens, you feel guilty. You regret it afterwards. You've got, whether it's grabbing a sugary snack to soothe anxiety or maybe reaching for comfort food after a long day. And this cycle can be really hard to break. And you may even find yourself asking, why the heck am I doing this? I know I shouldn't. I know this isn't helping me get healthier or lower my risk for recurrence, right? Especially with sugar. We know that there's a connection between sugar and cancer. Not to say that you can't have sugar at all. There are different sugars. That's a topic for another day, my friend, right? But when I say that the regret and the negative thoughts come into your head, I call that voice negative Nancy. No disrespect to anybody called Nancy, but it's like there's that voice. Why are you doing this? You should know better. You don't eat sugar. And as soon as we tell ourselves not to eat something, we're going to, by the way. We're all human, right? We're all human. But that's what happens. And so I think it's fair to say that you would prefer to regain control over your eating habits, right? Not be perfect. That's not what I'm saying. Progress over perfection, right? But to recognize that when your emotions are running high, that you can actually manage your emotional eating, tame your emotional eating in a way that actually supports your health and well-being without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling like your emotions are taking over your life. And especially when you're looking for a healthier way to cope, right? Ways that don't actually sabotage the progress you've made in your recovery, the progress you've made in your getting your energy back. It's about finding that balance, right? To be able to enjoy food without using it as a crutch. Totally, totally get it. This is something we talk about in my program, Resilient Routines. It's a whole module about emotional eating and cravings because it's such a big topic. Now, what you may have also noticed is that once you start having those foods, especially the sugary foods, it's almost like the gateway opens up and we can end up just saying, screw it. Why bother? It's too hard, right? And so there's also that knowing, because maybe that's what's happened in the past, that once you have a few of those things, you're just like, well, whatever. What does it matter? I may as well have what I want anyway. I'm not judging you if that's how your mind works. I'm able to tell you those things. And if you're recognizing it as something that you may have heard before, it's because I've heard it for over 20 years from the women that I've worked with. That's what happens. So I want you to know that you are not alone. And you may be worried, right? There may be that little nagging fear that if you don't get control of this, then it's going to get even harder and harder to break later on. So let's talk a little bit about why emotional eating happens, especially after cancer. Okay, because there's a difference. There's a difference here, and I think it's really important to kind of let you know this. Especially, I'm thinking of a client who said that before cancer, she never craved sugar. But yet, since treatment has ended, it's all she wants is sugary treats. She's making cookies. She's grabbing this. She's grabbing that. And it wasn't until I explained to her that due to nutritional deficiencies, due to hormonal changes, due to emotions, that we we don't know how else to cope with them yet, perhaps. That's often why these cravings can exist. A lot changes, especially if you're going through chemotherapy, but also radiation. Going through menopause and all the hormonal changes, being on hormone blocking medication and the way that that affects us too. So our body goes through so many changes as we go through breast cancer. This is just one of the side effects that not many people are talking about. So I want you to know that if you, like this client of mine, are experiencing cravings for sugar or carbohydrates, those tend to be the two main ones, that you weren't before, you're not going nuts. It's real, it exists, and there are things that you can do. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional side. We talked about this nutritional and hormone related, but we're going to talk about the emotional side today, because in the month of October, that's often what is being triggered. So I want you to kind of focus in on that today. And emotional eating after breast cancer is complex, just like your emotions, this mixed bag of emotions that we're feeling, right? This roller coaster ride that we can be on, breaking into tears at the drop of a hat and not having a clue why. It's not just about hunger, my friend. It's about filling an emotional void or soothing feelings that you may not even be aware yet that you have. Because after going through treatment, you might feel like food is one of the few comforts left. A lot of people do. And it's natural to seek comfort during difficult times. That's a human desire, right? We want to feel safe. We want to feel comforted. We want to feel stable. But when food becomes your primary coping mechanism, it can really interfere with your long-term health goals. And so I want to give you some tips, right, on how to manage that, on how to tame that. For this reason, because I think, and if I'm wrong, please let me know, but I think you're over there saying, I don't want to get sick again, right? And so if this is you, then this is important. Now, some of our common emotional triggers that breast cancer survivors might face include things like, just like I'm saying, the fear of recurrence, the fear of getting sick again. And this is often an unspoken fear that comes up with survivorship, right? There's this expectation we may put on ourselves and others may put, stop worrying about it. You're through it. Get over it already. But on the inside, you might be worrying about the future. You might have that fear, that black cloud following you around, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that fear can lead to tremendous anxiety. And I want to acknowledge it. The fear is real, but let me tell you a secret. Fear hates action. Let me say that again. Fear hates action. And so if we take action to lower our risk of recurrence, the fear starts to melt away. I've seen this over and over and over and over in all of my clients that go through all of my programs. Okay, so if you are silently worrying about the future, dealing with that anxiety, then food often can become that outlet, right? For dealing with those anxious thoughts. Maybe you're trying to stay away from alcohol, knowing that that can increase that risk. You're trying to be healthy. And so food it's almost like the accepted drug, right? Another thing that we might be dealing with, and again in October, this is just, it's put a spotlight on it, is the sadness over the changes that we've experienced in our life. Whether it's physical changes in your energy level or surgery scars, or feeling different emotionally, like you don't even know who you are anymore, or recognize who you are anymore. These shifts can be tough to process. It's almost like sadness that you don't feel like the woman you once were and don't know if you can get back to her. I know these are very real fears, and emotional eating might seem like a temporary relief for these uncomfortable feelings. I get it. And shall we mention stress from daily life? I mean, life doesn't stop after cancer. And so you're juggling recovery and work and family and social obligations. And let's talk about what's going on in the world right now. And it's an election year in the US. There is so much stress around us. Each one and all of these things can lead to stress. And in times of stress, we're often turned to familiar and comforting foods, whether it's a tub of ice cream. My food, by the way, because we all have them in this human existence, sour cream and onion potato chips. Sometimes I'll have them, but they don't come and hang out in the house. If they're in the house, I'm going to eat them because I'm a human too, right? And I've learned other ways of dealing with this emotional eating. Now, I think it's really important to recognize that emotional eating is not a failure. You're not failing if you're doing this. It's a response to how you're feeling. And it's something you can learn to tame. It's that easy. You may not have the tools yet. That's okay. I'm here to help you with those. But the goal is not to eliminate all emotional eating, but to find healthier ways to cope that nourish both your body and your emotions. Does that make sense? I hope so. So here are 3 small tips to help you manage that emotional eating so that you can get through this month without gaining 10 pounds. Because we know that maintaining a healthy weight is also important when it comes to lowering your risk of recovery. Sorry, got super tongue-tied there. Let me have a quick sip of my water before we dive into these 3 tips. Okay. Now, number 1 is we want to identify the emotional triggers, right? Once we have an awareness, we're switching from an emotional brain to a logical brain. So as soon as we make that switch, we're actually in better shape. So it may sound simple, but just this one thing alone can make a huge, huge difference. So you simply just take a moment to notice when you're most likely to reach for food as a source of comfort. Is it during stress, sadness, boredom, fear, loneliness, angry? Right? Recognizing these triggers can be an absolute eye-opener. And when I say recognize, I'm inviting you to look with observation and curiosity, not judgment. Really important. You're not judging yourself. You are a human being living a human existence in a really challenging world. Okay, so it's time to learn to be a lot more compassionate for yourself and not beat yourself up for things that you didn't learn yet. Right? Just like we don't beat up a baby when they haven't learned to walk. Why are we beating ourselves up if we haven't learned about emotional eating yet? Let's let that go, please. Okay, deal? All right, good. So once you understand what's actually driving the emotional eating, you can start to find better ways to cope when those moments come up. This awareness alone can be so empowering. Okay, so if nothing else, you take away from this video today, from this Wellbeing Wednesday, I invite you to start to identify and be aware of the emotion that you're feeling when you're reaching for the ice cream or the cookies or the cake or the sour cream and onion potato chips, okay? Now, number 2 is to have a plan for those stressful moments. I think this is really important because none of us really thrive if we're thrown into something on the spot. If we've got a little plan, then, and I'm talking small, nothing complicated, but if we know that when we feel this is what we're going to do before we do anything else, you'll find yourself more likely to do it. Okay. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, for example, it's easy to reach for whatever is quick and comforting. Cookies, right? But if you have a plan in place for those moments, something like, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to take a 5-minute walk. I'm going to sit outside and get some fresh air and work on some breath work. Or even, and this is one of my favorites, just sipping on a cup of herbal tea. It can help not only divert your attention away from the food, but it also helps to give you a sense of control, right? It's almost like hitting the pause button. Hitting the pause button, recognizing, hey, I'm overwhelmed right now. What do I want to do with this? Do I want to do something that's going to mess up my health goals, or do I want to do something that's going to nurture me, show love to myself, and actually help me feel better? You get to choose when you hit that pause button. I do this because I feel like it's our head that needs pausing, right? So just hitting the pause button to give yourself a little bit of grace and space to figure it out. And the third thing I want to talk about is keeping some healthier options available. Because let's face it, I'm honest about this, cravings happen. Emotional eating happens. And so rather than fighting against them, prepare for them by keeping healthier snacks available, right? Just like I said, if I've got sour cream and onion potato chips in the house and I'm in that space where I'm stressed out, maybe I'm waiting for a test results, or I've got an upcoming test, or there's something going on in the family, or whatever it is, if those are in the house, I'm going to grab them. If they're not, I'm much more likely to grab a handful of almonds and get the crunch. Or some carrots and celery with some hummus. I need that crunch for me because it's the potato chips, right? So for me, I'm not necessarily leaning towards a sweet treat. That's just me. You might be leaning towards a sweet treat. So it could be, what could you have instead? Is it an apple or a banana? Or maybe you've made a smoothie and frozen some, so it's an ice pop. Good idea, right? Instead of grabbing ice cream. And so there's ways that you can do things super easily so that you can make choices that actually align with your health goals, right? Without feeling deprived. So I want you to think about, and I invite you to think about, right? Managing emotional eating, especially during a heightened month like October for us breast cancer survivors, is about recognizing your triggers, finding ways to manage stress, that little walk, a cup of tea, some breath work, simple things, not difficult things, simple things for when the cravings strike. And remember, emotional eating is not something that you have to face alone. You've got this, one step at a time. And if you'd like more guidance on how to manage emotional eating and help you find that balance after cancer, I invite you to join our upcoming masterclass. I'm sorry if you can hear that. It's a motorcycle outside. From difficult to doable. 4 key steps to start eating healthier after cancer. Because together we can make healthy eating feel so much more doable, even on the tough days, especially on the tough days. I'm here to help you make that plan. Okay. Thank you so much for watching and joining me today for this Wellbeing Wednesday. Again, my name is Karin Del Maestro. I'm your health coach, breast cancer thriver, and resilient routines expert. And I specialize in helping breast cancer survivors just like you learn that eating healthier after cancer can be totally doable when you have the right approach and the right mindset. It's all you need, and a proven roadmap, right? Somebody to help guide you. So thank you so much for watching. I will look for your name in the masterclass. And other than that, I will see you next week for Wellbeing Wednesdays. Have a good one, guys, and make sure you're practicing these tools. Bye for now.